Have you ever just wanted to rip something apart? Reached a point where something primal takes over, even if just for a moment? We try not to indulge in these feelings because, well, most of us are trying to be good people. But entertainment, and specifically video games, let us take on worlds and fights and characters that translate our struggles into engrossing experiences. These can be struggles to find connection with others, chances to find healing for past trauma, and indulgences to let our darker sides out for a moment. And this darkness in service of the light is the core of Doom 2016. A game that brought life back to a dormant franchise by focusing on an impulse: rip and tear. And in this simple but electrifying story of an ancient warrior once again called to battle against the forces of hell, we see how a classic story was revitalized in the modern day, how Doom's gameplay loops and combat style engage and reward aggression, and what it truly means to rip and tear until it's done. The original Doom from id Software debuted in 1993, with id co-founder and lead programmer John Carmack creating a game engine for a new first-person shooter originally titled Green and Pissed, before changing its name to Doom. And Doom, that's a hell of a name. Eventually, the 5-person development team of Carmack, programmer John Romero, artist Adrian Carmack and Kevin Cloud, and designer Tom Hall self-published Doom. And the original game is a little Dungeons & Dragons, a little Evil Dead 2, and a whole lot of aliens. So yeah, it's my shit. We won't get too deep into id's original game, but the first-person shooter designed around fast combat, aggression, and a heavy metal aesthetic that was as hardcore as it was tongue-in-cheek was an enormous hit. And this story of a nameless space marine fighting off legions of demons while knee-deep in the dead on a Mars military outpost, eventually working his way into hell itself to fight the spawns of Satan, is one of the most influential games of all time. As the descendant of id's previous game, Wolfenstein 3D, Doom is one of the original first-person shooters, and is so synonymous with the genre that the games that first followed in its wake were known as Doom clones instead of FPS. There's a simplicity to the 1993 original that's helped it stand the test of time, with its creators mashing together early 3D level designs with 2D sprite enemies. The result is something charming in its idiosyncratic design, and there's a focus on combat and constant forward movement. That's both intentional and a byproduct of its limitations. The Doom guy can't even look up or down. But that original focus on forward momentum that slices through the legions of hell came to be the core of Doom. Cue many ports, Doom 2, Final Doom, and Doom 64, all looking to refine and amplify the original vision. In the years that followed, the first-person shooter genre would branch out more and more, but Doom remained quintessentially itself until going dormant between 1997 and 2004, until a return with Doom 3 in 2004. Don't worry about the movie. An outlier as a moody survival horror game that revamped the franchise, with a focus on spooky shadows and scares. But when id Software announced Doom 4 in 2008, it was the start of a long and difficult development process. Constant rebuilds and redesigns moved away from a story that made the player into an anonymous soldier in a larger army's war against Hell's invasion of Earth. A game designed much more in line with popular shooters of the time as the fan-derided Call of Doom. Eventually, id chose to re-embrace the original's aggression. Doom was released on May 13, 2016 for Windows, PS4, and Xbox One, and later ported to Nintendo Switch and Stadia. Written by Adam Gascoigne, with flavor text by Chad Mossholder. And this not-quite reboot sees hell again unleashed on Mars, this time caused by the experiments of the greedy and satanic Union Aerospace Corporation, or UAC, which has opened a portal to hell to mine its energy to solve Earth's needs in the year 2149. But the UAC's overreach and the betrayal of researcher Olivia Pierce has brought the invasion. Now, only the Doomslayer, a mythical warrior found entombed in hell, can stop the forces of evil and save the Earth before it's too late. And Doom 2016 is a dang masterpiece. It's an 80s heavy metal album come to life and slamming headfirst into a bloody modern action movie like The Raid. It's the game all those 80s satanic panic censors had nightmares of come to life, which is hilarious because it's a game all about destroying the forces of hell. It's the most Christian game ever? Thank you, God, for this holy shotgun. Under the direction of Marty Stratton and Hugo Martin, with a now massive id Software team working for publisher Bethesda Softworks, Doom 2016 draws a direct line to the original's aggression-focused gameplay and simplicity of story, while now citing Masters of the Universe and heavy metal as major touchpoints. Everything is bigger and wilder here, until it starts to become a darkly comedic parody. Seen through the eyes of the stoic and justice-focused Doomslayer, the hubris of the UAC's Argent-powered experiments are meant to be judged, and the damned armies of hell are ripe for destruction. Empowered by a warrior whose rage has elevated him beyond humanity, not even the most terrifying faces of evil are meant to be feared. By its design and legacy, Doom is a conduit for righteous rage, a siphon for our anger, spit out through the ultimate arbiter of destruction. There are two main types of player-character relationships that inform a game. There are the games that focus on a fully formed person the player controls, which turns you into a hybrid of active participant and passive observer. The story of these characters is ultimately their own, and their actions are the result of who the game's creators have shaped them to be. The second type are the games in which the protagonist is almost completely devoid of character, naturally leading the player to determine their personality on their own, and as a result, identify as the character themselves. It's easier for this second relationship to occur in a first-person perspective game as, obviously, we're seeing through the character's eyes and are in essence in their heads. Of course, there's plenty of exceptions to this, and plenty of modern first-person games manage to balance self-identification and third-person observation. But when a game chooses to make their protagonist nearly silent, these personalities move much closer toward what the player decides. And this is where we arrive at Doom's intersection of character-driven rage and player-provided action. Whether or not you've played previous Doom games, the id Software team very quickly tells you all you need to know about the Doomslayer. A command to
rip and tear until it is done.
An ancient tomb, a bare-handed encounter with the possessed, and an immediate impulse to suit up, grab a weapon, and go to work. Slowly, testaments found by the player uncover the history of the Doomslayer, pushing the warrior into more of an ancient knight figure than a marine. But the truth, as clarified later in Doom, is both. And Doom provides a sense of déjà vu, remaking the original but keeping it in tension with current canon. Doom Eternal would later spell out the history of the Doomslayer and his world, but the larger mythology of Doom 2016 is window dressing. Just enough world building to make you feel like a vessel of holy wrath in an unholy war. Ultimately, the Doomslayer is you who succumbs to your anger and outrage at a terrible world. Regarding the origin of the Doom guy in the 1993 original, series co-creator John Romero said, "There was never a name for the Doom Marine because it's supposed to be you. The Doom novels just made up a name. We had no input on that either." Of course, there were little touches of characterization in the original, that severed bunny head being a silly source of our Marine's rage. But if a game and its central character become iconic, fans will always clamor for insights into their hero. It also didn't hurt that the original game featured an ever-worsening face of the faceless protagonist to reflect damage. Small cutscenes and scripted actions that illustrate how the Doomslayer interacts with his world, like choosing to destroy instead of delicately shut down a computer, or using his bare hands to wrench open a broken door, are what put us in the hero's headspace. It's not enough to tell the players to get angry when they play. You have to translate aggression into how the game is designed. Like the original, Doom 2016 is all about speed and forward progress. Most importantly, the team emphasized the style as push-forward combat, with the player almost entirely getting health and shields from the enemies they kill. It's an active discouragement of the sort of hang back and cover tactics codified by games like Halo or Gears of War. To further encourage the player's forward push, 2016 added glory kills in its melee execution system, with the Doomslayer using his bare hands to tear apart a stunned enemy for extra health, shields, and ammo. There's a specific word that can really come to define what makes Doom's gameplay feel so good in its aggression, and that's snap. It's the fast snap of taking a shot and watching your target instantly reel from impact. The snap of grabbing a target in a glory kill and watching the bones break with just enough resistance. The snap of grabbing a new weapon with the confidence of someone who knew it belonged to them already. It's why I love the shotgun so much, and why I'm so indifferent about the plasma rifle. One is a tool to dominate the devil. The other is a spray and pray that helps enemies soak up damage. I'm here to get down. Which one do you think I'm going to use most? Overall, Doom's gameplay loops are simple. You progress forward until the area you encounter is filled with demonic forces and is sealed until they're all wiped out, either due to the facility's lockdown protections or hell itself trying to kill you. In either case, there is no running from the fight. How you take out your enemies is slowly learned intuition, filling up on health from glory-killed smaller enemies while you bust down your biggest targets. The game also makes you feel like a bigger and bolder badass by introducing deadlier enemies one at a time, making their first appearance feel a little scary, and then making them a common part of subsequent loops. Your first Baron of Hell feels like an insurmountable wall. Later on, fighting multiple Barons feels like a challenge, but one you can overcome with confidence. Doom isn't a perfect game. Wiping out an entire room only to have a hiding imp force you into a game of hide-and-seek isn't a great way to keep the aggression up. But when it flows right, it feels incredible. A huge part of keeping that aggression up is composer Mick Gordon's score, which updates the original game's classic soundtrack with a down-tuned heavy metal meets electronic approach. And Gordon uses a 9-stringed electric guitar? That's metal as hell. It's a soundtrack that constantly pulses, like a panther waiting to pounce, until another fight starts, and Gordon rips into really heavy chords as you shred your enemies. Rip and tear on the guitar, rip and tear on the controller. Video games are about self-empowerment on two levels. There's the self-empowerment of the player themselves. The satisfaction of going from playing a game for the first time and struggling to overcome its initial challenges to being a master is real-world self-empowerment. But there's also the self-empowerment course that every character is set on. It's rare to start a game with every weapon and power at your disposal, and when a game chooses to do so, most characters are quickly depowered, sending you on a journey to taste the glory of those early minutes again. Most often, you start weaker, with fewer weapons, knowing less skills, and much closer to death. Leveling up, armoring up, and tooling up pushes your character into battles that weren't possible at the start. Doom strikes a tricky balance in this constant path towards self-empowerment, as even at the start it's made clear that the Doomslayer is a being of such incredible strength and rage that he had to be locked away forever. Doom's level progression is an awesome piece of game design, as it always has you just at the threshold of being more powerful than anything in your way, but not by much. The weapons you find and their power-ups are the true gateways to expressing the greater power within the Slayer. Once you finish the game and replay each mission with everything unlocked, you feel even deadlier. Doom is a horror series. It's a story about hell unleashed on Earth, and all manner of horrifying monsters tearing apart every living thing they can get their hands on, so how could it not be? But the difference is that this is a horror story that encourages you to not be afraid, and instead assert yourself over legions of the damned. The hell of Doom is kind of that cool hell that every metal band wants to go to, but with enough grossness and torture that you don't really want to be there. I mean, yeah, it's got a lot of chains and sick mountains, but I don't really want to chill with a mancubus. But it's not just the forces of hell that are worthy of the Doomslayer's wrath. Samuel Hayden and the UAC insist that the complications of the demonic invasion are worth it because of what they can do for humanity, trying to get the Slayer to use only half measures to preserve the facility. That, of course, is not what it means to rip and tear. And the further we push into the Argent facility, the more we discover that the UAC was a cult, full of demonic worship, human sacrifices, and a perverse fascination with modifying demons to make them even deadlier. There is nothing worth saving in this horrifying monstrosity of human hubris. Not even the most devoted of human followers are spared from Hell's wrath, with the increasingly decrepit Olivia Pierce turned into the enormous spider mastermind. Ultimately, we turn its head into a canoe with our big fucking gun. Look, I know a lot of these characters and the lore of Doom was majorly shifted in Eternal and the Ancient Gods DLC, but let's not worry about that right now. Eternal gets really up its own ass with all sorts of lore dumps and revisionism. Doom 2016 is about simplicity of focus and a leanness in its emotions. Eternal was a progression of Doom 2016's combat loops, challenges, high-powered weaponry, and demonic war. And I can't deny that Eternal is an incredibly well-made game, but there was something about it that kept me from connecting with it on a gut level like I did with 2016. In place of id Software's focus on instinctual, aggressive attacks, was an exponential level of complexity in the fight to survive. I no longer felt like the embodiment of righteous anger. I felt like I was solving the world's most violent math problem. Maybe that's for some people, but it wasn't quite for me. What speaks to me is Doom 2016's full-bodied embrace of anger. So often, when we think of anger, we think of it in its most negative and destructive forms. Anger can eat away at ourselves, turn us spiteful and bitter, and when it turns outward, it can hurt people in ways we would never do in our right minds. But there is a form of righteous anger, and an anger that causes positive change. The all-consuming rage against the forces of hell is evocative of many instances of God's anger seen throughout the Bible. God is a righteous judge, and a judge who feels indignation every day. O you who love the Lord, hate evil. He preserves the lives of his saints. He delivers them from the hand of the wicked. But the role of anger in the human heart is not so simple. Be ye angry and sin not. Away from religion, we find dealing with and shaping our anger much more complex. Anybody can become angry, said Aristotle. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person and to the right degree and at the right time and for the right purpose and in the right way, that is not within everybody's power and is not easy. Bitterness is like cancer, said Maya Angelou. It eats upon the host. But anger is like fire. It burns it all clean. How we choose to control our anger, mold it, and direct it isn't easy. Not for an emotion that can overwhelm even the most logical people. When used right, it can reshape the world. It's the opposite of stoicism. We don't endure the world's wrongs without complaint. We fight back until those wrongs are brought to a permanent end. I don't think this is the big secret of Doom, but it is at the core of why it can be such an angry and blood-soaked game, and still feel good. It's delivered through an over-the-top and almost cartoonish lens. It's catharsis that is broad enough to apply to any of our frustrations. The world built by the UAC is built on bloodshed and evil. Even if it temporarily benefits humanity, it's essentially corrupt, and worthy of being burned to the ground by the Slayer. At the very end, Hayden can't accept that, and betrays us to keep the world running on hell, which will ultimately create more tragedy in Eternal. The cycle of rip and tear can't stop until evil is stopped at the core, even if it costs everything. There was a time when I was younger when difficult games would make me frustrated, and subconsciously move from enjoying a game to being mad at it. Overcoming an impossible boss or conquering a tricky level on the 50th try was a matter of necessity. I had to beat this game, and only then could I be satisfied. That frustrating relationship was what led to me almost entirely cutting video games out of my life for years. Who needs that in their life? Years later, I started to pick up video games again, and it proved to me that I was a different person. I no longer put myself in an endless cycle of rage with a piece of entertainment that should, by all rights, be a happy escape and a release. I wanted story over obstacles, characters over trophies, satisfaction over competition, and then came Doom. A game that should trap me in an endless cycle of rage with its gameplay loops designed to push you till you break. Instead, I found an avenue for good anger, a pressure release for my frustrations with the world. Doom didn't create new anger in me. It let me see what was there, confront what it meant, and explore it in a harmless, really fun way. Doom 2016, for all its carnage and horrors, is broadly cartoonish. Nothing is real, and everything can be applied to any of our own frustrations. The world can be a terrible place. And whatever you think of the concept of hell, evil is obvious when you see it. No one person can change the world with their fists, but it's nice to think that one man filled with righteous anger is out there. And because it's so easy for us to fit into his shoes, maybe a little bit of the Doom Slayer is in all of us. Maybe we'll rip and tear, and one day, it really will be done. Thanks for watching today's video. My first video on a video game in quite a while. If you're a newer subscriber, you may not know it, but I've done several video game videos in the past. And after a long time away, I'm finally getting back around to focusing on the medium. Doom 2016 in particular was something that I've had thoughts about for quite a few years now. And I thought this would be a perfect way to dive back into covering video games. This is an extremely fun game, and I really love the Doom series. In particular, it's just a really satisfying game to play. You can feel angry but focused, but also just have a lot of fun while going through this really outlandish world. I mean, you're fighting demons on Mars. That's metal and really fun and really silly. But what I really love about this reboot of Doom, I guess maybe not really a reboot, but you know what I'm saying, is that central philosophy of rip and tear until it's done. It's a very simple concept, but it speaks to a lot of the game's approach, and also why it really appealed to me as a player. I think that anger can be a really taboo subject in society and entertainment, because a lot of the times we're being discouraged from feeling angry. Anger can of course be a really destructive impulse, but when it's motivated by true outrage at the wrong things in the world and is directed toward actual positive change, anger is a good emotion. So I wanted to talk about that within the context of this game. Obviously, tearing apart demons in a video game is one of the most harmless ways that you can express anger, and I think that video games give us a really good outlet for a lot of our emotions in life. And if you approach them right and you implement them well in your everyday life, video games are a very positive outlet and a wonderful piece of art. And like I said in the video, I'm not a huge fan of Doom Eternal, but I do think it is a very well done game. It's just a game that really doesn't speak to me. I mean, there are so many wall climbing sections in that game, and I got really tired of having my face an inch away from a gray wall for an hour at a time pretty quickly into that video game. If you've played any of the Doom games, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Doom 2016 and Doom as a franchise overall. As I've already announced, December is Resi-December Evil, and yes, I will be covering video games in that as well. So I thought that this would be a good warm-up for the channel and a reintroduction to video games overall. I'd also love to hear your suggestions on other video games that you'd like for me to cover, because it's a fairly unexplored avenue on my channel at the moment. But there will be plenty more to come. As always, shout out to my patrons and a huge thank you for their continued support. If you'd like to be a patron, it's only $1 a month for early access to every video and exclusive Patreon-only reviews. We're coming up on some videos that I've been planning for a long time, and I'm really excited to share them with you, so look forward to some really awesome topics coming very soon. So until next time, I hope that you're taking care of yourselves, and remember, rip and tear until it's done. See you again soon.